Testing, check, check. Can you hear
Test.
everything?
I can hear you. Yep. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Chair arm is weird. Okay. Can you hear my like jacket?
I hear everything. Yeah.
Although my t-shirt
But your
is
chair, I mean, that's these are very
yeah, that
intense.
hot mic. Oh, my shirt is like working hard today. That winter weight. Um, okay.
Oh,
How
no.
did you do that?
There's little buttons right
Okay.
there.
I don't even know if I'm gonna use it, but it was like my OCD was going crazy because this one was lower than the
Lower
other
than
one.
that
Okay.
one.
Oh, now I feel good. All right.
My recollection is, it was in the virtual space. It was, I think I saw someone who was involved with the film festival or the film society, and then we ended up following each other on socials. And then, you kind of are a natural like community builder. So some of the different activities you've done, whether again around film or the Stonewall sports. So I don't know when we physically first met or met in person, but I know that, I followed your online presence and the great work that you're doing. And yeah, so, and it's been many years, you've been in town many years. I've lived here since 2000. So at some point in there, we bumped into each other initially and probably just a few hellos and highs. And now I've been able to have a little bit more deeper conversations.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I think I definitely, yeah, we were like aware of each other, and that's kind of like a Fargo thing where, especially like nowadays, like you just kind of, someone is friends with somebody, you've seen somebody's profile on like a suggested friends or something. And I can't remember the first time we physically maybe interacted other than maybe just like at Jasper or something, like
Right.
nodding, like, oh, hey, like I know you, but I don't know you. But I feel like the first time we had like maybe a full conversation in person was when we invited you to do the ceremonial first pitch at the very first ever Stonewall Sports Fargo kickball game, which would have been in 2022, like August. And we were like excited to have you because you're the first openly gay legislator
Mhm.
in the state. And so it was like a nice honor to have you there to help kick off this new kind of entity that had not existed
Yeah.
that we knew of ever in North Dakota, much less Fargo. And so that was a really fun day. Do you remember that day at all? Do you remember
Oh yeah.
anything about that day?
Yeah, I remember, the field set up and, was honored to be asked. And what I was excited about with the, um, execution, I guess I'll call it, or the creation of Stonewall Sports here in our community is, that was fairly after COVID. So again, people are coming out of their homes, we're coming back into community. But it was this space being created for people to interact differently, right? Outside of a bar scene or a specific event where we all sit in chairs and look forward, you don't really interact. But to bring competitive sports as part of that, I think was exciting.
Yeah,
So
it
it
was.
was fun to be a part of, and I'm glad that Stonewall continues to be such a success, and it sounds like continuing to evolve to different sports, and obviously growing within certain other sports. So
Yeah, it's been neat to kind of see the growth of that. That first year, really had no idea what we were doing, and we had a lot of support from the Twin Cities chapter. They were all there that day to help us out, and I think we were all just kind of. It was a little bit of faking it till we make it kind of a
sure.
thing, because no one knew, yeah, what to expect, and we are just out in this like field in the middle of nowhere, and there's like drag queens walking around, and it's just like, what are we doing? Or kicking ball. I don't know. It was great, and it's been amazing to see how it's like evolved and kind of become a little bit of a beacon for the LGBT community in the area and kind of beyond. And we get messages all the time from people in other smaller places, even or like even Bismarck and stuff, who have asked like kind of how do we get this going here.
Mhm.
And so that's been kind of neat to see that people obviously see a need for community in that way
Yeah.
and are trying to figure out what's the magic solution here to create that.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who, when new people move to the area, I often get emails. Hey, we just moved to the area. We're a lesbian couple with our 4-year-old, and we're trying to get connected. What would you suggest? And so often it's Stonewall Sports, whether they compete or want to play. If nothing else, it's a social environment to observe and interact and meet people. And I think one of the things that is so special about Stonewall is, you guys are very welcoming, so it's not just the activity that happens, but then there's the socials that happen after, or even some of the, I think, service projects you've done in the community and whatnot. So it's different ways that people can be engaged, whether they compete or not. And so, again, it's been a great entry point for folks, those of us that have lived here for decades and new people to the community.
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to expand the sports, not just to like offer more things and just have more programming throughout the year, but thinking of even from a sports specific perspective, some people don't want to play kickball or can't play kickball or whatever.
Sure.
So maybe, yeah, bags or pickleballs. People keep asking about pickleball, trivia. People want us to do trivia. I just learned that that's like one of the easiest things not only to roll out in the Stonewall chapters, but one of the most like beloved sports, quote unquote, that the other chapters offer is trivia. And like it's I don't know. I think even at one point one of the cities, maybe Kansas City, even had like competitive cheerleading. I don't know, we've thought about trying to do like flag football or like anything like that. We're trying to figure out how we can continue to create spaces for even new people to maybe come and be attracted to be a
Yeah.
part of it.
Well, I love the idea of trivia. I mean, that's another place you and I bump into each other often.
Yeah.
Wednesday night trivia at Wild Terra. My friend group, we joke. I have very intelligent friends, and my job is to show up and answer just one question each night, and then I'm done. They answer most of the questions, but our friend group really evolved through trivia. It was Dempsey's on Friday nights, and then eventually we, I think, stopped doing that just because of some people had kids and we weren't going out as much on Friday nights. So then Wild Tear on Wednesdays and sometimes Vic's on Friday, more for the burgers than the trivia. But yeah, that's a way that we interact. And so I think that'd be fun I'd be happy to help get something like that started. A
Yeah.
Stonewall trivia, and again, engage a whole nother group of people, especially when you think intergenerationally, right? Like a
Yeah.
way that we can bring in some of our elders and some of the great work that Red River Rainbow Seniors has done in our community. But, they may not come out and, I don't know, I'm assuming a lot, but come out and kick the ball or run around and play flag football, but to come
Yeah.
and help us answer some questions and win some trivia.
Exactly, yeah. Speaking of that, your team is usually our toughest competitor. We're recording this on a Thursday, and last night my team did terribly. We completely lost both rounds. It was one of our worst weeks ever. But
Oh,
your team, you weren't there, but
I wasn't there. Yeah.
your team was good. Y'all change your name every time. Is there a strategy behind that?
Recently, it used to be inside jokes, right? So something that happened within our friend group in the previous week or something in a group thread. Now, national and international affairs has given us a lot of content. So it usually is
Yeah.
tied into something happening within the news.
Last night I think your team was it was not that. It was a little more just like pop culture, like punny. I think it was Beastie Boys to Men, I think is what
I
your
mean,
team was. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So you moved to Fargo in like 2000. Where are you originally from?
yeah, so I grew up in Minot, north central North Dakota, about 3.5, 4 hours away from here. All my families, or most of my family, is still there. I have my parents, my mom's still working, and then I have two brothers and a niece and a nephew up there. So get back there as often as I can, especially now that there's kiddos involved. So it's a little bit more than just getting up there in the holidays, but it's yeah. And I've moved here to go to NDSU, and I've called Fargo home ever since.
As a Josh from Minot, do you feel competitive with the other famous Josh from Minot?
I'm glad to be in that club with Mr. Dumal. So yeah, he was. So my high school, Bishop Bryan High School, was a Catholic school, was directly across the street from Minot State, where he played football and was the star quarterback. So once I remember watching him I don't know how old I was, watching the show Las Vegas, in which he was on, and I don't even think at that time I tied him to being a Minosian, but more so I just loved the idea of these people have these jobs and they live in their hotel, this resort hotel, and how cool is that? And so that was what got me hooked on that show. It had nothing to do with Josh. I didn't even know he was a Minosian. And then it was later on I found out I had a coworker at NDSU. My first job once I graduated was working in the Office of Admission. And one of my supervisors, she went to Minot State, and she had stories of um, uh, making out with Josh Duhamel at a party. And so that was kind of the connection that I was like, oh, he's from Minot. I didn't realize that. So
Yeah, I didn't know he was from North Dakota till I moved here. Or if I actually know, I take that back. I did know that because I listened to a podcast called Who Weekly, and they talk about the whole like premise is it's celebrities that they're either a them or a who, and a them is that you could ask anybody and they know who they are. It's how it's trying to rank like how big a celebrity is, and Josh Duhamel kind of rides in that middle. I feel like lately he's become more of a them. He kind of rides a little bit of that like thing of maybe some people don't quite connect who he is. And there was a whole bit they did whenever he became the face of the North Dakota Legendary campaign. That was just like a running bit on them, and so that's why I knew that he was from North Dakota then right before I moved. But I actually met him briefly in Atlanta. I don't even know how many years ago it was now, working on the movie Life as We Know It. I was just a PA on that
Really?
movie, and I recognized him from the show Las Vegas. Him and Katherine Heigl were like the
Yeah.
stars, and I knew both of their like names. Actually, I think I knew him from Win a Date with Tad Hamilton. That was I think the movie that I connected with him. And then Melissa McCarthy was in that movie, and I didn't know who she was, and it was wild to see her like become this big star. But
Yeah.
so I had like a little tiny little like I mean, we were not friends on set or anything, but you'd say, "Oh, excuse me," if you're like walking by somebody. But I've not met him since I've lived in Fargo. I feel like everyone I know has had a Josh Duhamel experience,
Mhm.
and I've yet to have one.
Well, again, growing up in Minot, you'd go back for the holidays, and there would be Josh Duhamel sightings. And so then, this was pre Snapchat and all that. So I don't remember how it got communicated. Maybe it was just, text to text to text, but then you'd have people running around town trying to find him when he was back for Christmas, especially because I think at that time Fergie was with him when they were still
Mhm.
together. So then it was more about a Fergie sighting than it was a Josh sighting.
Yeah,
But, and I remember exclusively um, the couple we tried to chase down were dive bars. So they frequented some of the good Minot dive bars. Yeah.
that's fun. I do feel like North Dakota has an interesting pedigree of famous exports, I guess. Like Peggy Lee, that's incredible.
Mhm.
Again, I had no idea she was from here till I moved here. Even the like Bob Dylan connection, like is kind of fun, and yeah, it's neat. Now Josh Boschee. I mean,
We'll see. We'll see.
what about Fargo? So you came here for college?
Yeah, came here to NDSU. I was going to be a veterinarian. My uncles owned, or one of them still owns a vet hospital here in town, and so our summers were spent coming and spending a week in Fargo. My godparents and great aunt and uncle, they lived south. They lived south of town. Had the pool, had horses, so it was always kind of an experience. But then we'd get to go into town 1 or 2 days and watch procedures in the clinic, help clean cages. So it seemed like a fun thing to do, and but once I got here, I was like, that's a lot of chemistry and a lot of biology, and I don't think I can swing that. So, ended up actually, ironically switching my major to political science only because I was involved in student government. I didn't have a political ideology or identity at that time. I just, knew I liked student government, and that's what I thought political science kind of was. I often say I was a good student. I wasn't good at college, or no, I was good at college. I wasn't a good student. So most of my skills I learned, or my education at NDSU was my involvement in different activities or working with campus leaders. I wasn't necessarily my grades don't reflect some of that.
Yeah, I
So
look at my college experience similarly. I think I learned more about just life and independence than I did. I mean, I learned a lot, and I'm proud of the things I learned. I got a lot of great like educational experiences, but yeah, I think I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta. A lot of like people everywhere, but the community I grew up in was very very small, and it's almost called sheltered. I grew up in a religious like in an evangelical kind of world, and everyone kind of like went to school and church together and everything. And so going to college, I went to college an hour away from home, and
mm,
it was eye opening the moment my like parents drove away, and I was like, wow, now I'm doing this. I've got to like figure out how to meet people. I've got to like make my own decisions. And I remember the first time I decided to skip class, I felt so
yeah,
guilty, but I also felt really empowered. Like, oh, I can just like I can do things on my own. I can like decide what I want to do.
yeah.
Crazy experience.
No, I share almost identical stories, right? So, I first generation college student. My parents are very supportive, but working hard people. So, like, I applied to college on my own. I went to orientation on my own. I drove myself to college because I came a week early because my roommate, who was a good friend from high school, was in the marching band. So we got to have access to the residence halls early. And I remember showing up there, and our room was on the second floor of Reed Johnson Hall, which are two 3-story buildings connected by a breezeway. And our room was right above the breezeway. And I said, Dustin, we can we can sneak out. We can like jump out the window. And then as someone who had never snuck out before, who always followed the rules, like that was my opportunity. And he's my nickname back then was Boschee. And he's like, Bushy, we can just walk out that door. Right. Like, so that was my similar where it's like, oh, I have this freedom. I have this ability. Even though I wanted the independence, I didn't recognize that I had it already, you know?
You say that with your nickname. How do you pronounce your last name? Because I feel like I hear everyone has their own like version of your last name. I feel like
Yeah. So my family, we say Boschee, and that's kind
Boschee.
of from my grandpa on down. But most other people who have it spelled this way, they're Bogies,
Okay,
good
yeah,
Germans from Russia,
yeah.
folks.
Do you ever hear Boucher, like Bobby Boucher? Do you hear
Oh
that a
yeah.
lot?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Boucher.
Well, and again, so high school, I was the water boy for the track team.
Oh,
So there's
perfect.
plenty of Bobby Boucher jokes.
It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've always said Boucher, so I'm gonna pat myself on the back
There
for
you
that.
go.
Okay, maybe the phonics I learned as a kid stuck with me. I don't
Yeah.
know. Cool. Well, so you've been in when did you first enter politics, or what made you decide to like go into politics?
Yeah. So, like I said, I majored in political science, but, um, wasn't involved in politics, didn't, have necessarily a political leaning. My faith life was really important to me. I grew up Catholic again, and really, I think, fortunate in the chance of the churches in Minot at that time were very social justice focused in terms of like helping the poor and making sure we take care of single moms, and never really heard any fire and brimstone. So that really, I think, was a defining part of what led to my political ideology is my continued faith life there. So graduated from NDSU, worked on campus, started, learning more about myself, my own identity, and questioning who I was, and my own authenticity as discovering or coming to terms with being a gay man. And so it was 2008, I think, the spring of, I decided to start getting involved in Democratic politics because I had read Barack Obama, then Senator Barack Obama's book, Audacity of Hope. And I was like, who is this guy? He sounds pretty, he had a vision and he seemed exciting. Um, so I reached out to the Democratic Party to see how I could get involved, and at that time they were hiring people. Actually the Obama campaign was hiring staff in North Dakota, and that hadn't happened in decades. So I got hired on as a college organizer, and that's where I really learned engagement in politics and the power that we all have as individual voters. I had the privilege of going to every college campus across the state, getting students, faculty, staff involved, working with the organizers that had those the greater communities. So like in Dickinson, I worked on Dickinson State, but then there was organizers working throughout the entire community. And like I said, it was really about learning how we have to be agents of change. And so an organizing model that was asking people what they thought was important to them, encouraging them to cast their vote, to understand who is running. At that time, I was obviously advocating for President or Senator Obama, who became President Obama, and I fell in love with it. So after that election, decided to get involved and helped other people run for office, whether they were running for city commission, helped a friend run for state legislature, had another friend who was running for a statewide office, and some won, some did not, but just really enjoyed propping up good people and helping them, be a good voice for change or opportunity for us. And then in 2011, end of 2011, going into 2012, I was asked to run for office, and I said no several times, but was encouraged to continue to look at the numbers and see if it was a winnable district for a legislative race, and so jumped in and was fortunate to get across the finish line that November. So
What was your hesitation at first?
I think my hesitation back then was very much I didn't think I was qualified. I didn't think I was good enough. There was other people. I was new to Democratic politics. There was a long line of people who should go before me. Um, but we run as teams, as legislative teams often, because you have one senator and two representatives in each legislative district. And, two of the other guys, specifically our senator at the time, Rick Olick, who was running for Senate, was pretty committed. And then Bob Jansen, who had worked for Governor Sinner a couple decades before, was considering. And so I think we just looked at the fact that there'd be some diversity in our generational, me being younger and them being a little older. And yeah, jumped in and glad I did it. I mean, there's a lot of times I look back, I can't believe it's been, going on 14 years of representing North Fargo and parts of downtown. But it's been such an honor. And what I love about it is the ability, again, to connect people to creating change. You get messages from whether it's constituents or people from other parts of the state who say, XYZ is impacting my family. How do we fix it? Or this law change happened, and now the unintended consequence is I got a phone call this morning that said, a childcare law that has happened. And so there's less families getting childcare assistance. How can we fix that? And so really trying to be a solution problem solver.
Thinking of that, like, North Dakota is such a red state, and as a long-standing Democrat, what have you learned kind of about figuring out how to, like, find solutions or making change or just getting things done? What has that been like as a Democrat in a very red state?
Yeah. Um, So when I was elected, I was very active in the LGBT community as in terms of being an activist. We were working to get some legislative changes to pass a statewide non-discrimination law to protect people in housing and employment. Um, did a lot of community organizing within our community, and when I was elected, I had a conversation with myself of, am I going to be the activist or am I going to be the advocate who has a seat at the table? And I chose being an advocate who had a seat at the table. And what that meant to me was making sure that I spent time understanding the process, trying to bring in other voices to make sure that they have their own agency in helping create change, and to work collaboratively with people. And as that's evolved into my time as a legislator in our state is I consider myself very pragmatic. I look at if a proposal comes forward or someone wants me to help fix something, what is the likelihood it's going to pass? And not necessarily saying no, but saying these are the things we're going to have to do to make sure that this change can happen. And so that's might be getting certain other legislators who primarily are Republican on board, trying to identify which Republicans in their district are facing the same experiences or challenges and how do we get them on board. And so a lot of what I've done is building relationships. And what I've found from that is I've been able to be successful in passing policy, especially in what's considered a super minority within our Democratic Party or within the legislature as a Democrat, and had a pretty good success rate because generally legislators across the political spectrum know that if I'm showing up with an idea, not only is it probably something worth considering, but I'm able to help them with their initiatives too. It's kind of, that's the hard part about politics or policy is it becomes pretty transactional sometimes. And so within that, how do I learn what's important to you? How can I help you if we agree on that? And then, how do you help me make sure we get these things passed as well?
Oh, that's gotta be hard. I can't imagine. Especially when you think about like trying to figure out is the priority of the community that you're serving. Uh, and even in that, everyone has their own answer of what the priority should be. I mean, you live downtown. Obviously, you've represented downtown, but now you're running for mayor for the entire city of Fargo. Well, I have two questions there. One, what was the decision, or was the crux of making the decision decide to run to leave state legislator legislature
Legislature.
chair,
Yeah.
um, to run for mayor, and then what is that like now having to broaden your scope, to think beyond the people that you've typically represented?
Yeah. No, good question. And it comes up often because, one of the things that I think people bring up is all you're going to continue to advocate for is downtown. And a lot of people in Fargo, for better or worse, are tired of hearing about just downtown. They have their own concerns in their community, regardless of what part of Fargo they live in. Um, and what I've learned through those conversations is helping people understand that, I'm not just advocating for what's best for downtown Fargo or North Fargo when I'm in Bismarck. I've been advocating for all of Fargo or even the Red River Valley because we are very interconnected as a community. We have people who live here but work in another town or vice versa. We have people who live in Fargo and their kids go to West Fargo Public Schools. We want to make sure those kids are successful too. So really, how do we look at this regionally? And of course, what's good for Fargo is actually good for North Dakota because we are an economic hub and throughout the state, being commodity driven with a lot of our industries, both energy and agriculture, Fargo's always kind of been that steady Betty. We've got good growth, we've got economic diversity, and so when there are downturns statewide because of some of the other industries, Fargo is certainly impacted by that, but we're also able to help keep the ship going forward for the entire state. I didn't answer your question yet. I just went down my own
No, that
little
was good.
path there, but as far as why did I decide to run? Mayor Mahoney was termed out, so it was going to be an open seat. So I really looked at that and the standpoint that if you're going to come, an opportunity to come home to serve your community that you love, this is probably the best opportunity. And so then I started visiting with folks about what would they want to see in their next mayor. You're getting a new one regardless, and so who would you like to see? What would you like to see? And what I've heard is overwhelmingly, there's certainly concerns people have throughout our community, but above and beyond the concerns, people are proud to call Fargo home. They love this city, just like I do. And they want a leader who's going to help bring us together and move us forward. Um, Kind of going back to representing downtown versus the rest of the city, that's problematic. We continue to see people who want to pit parts of the community against each other instead of saying policies that get passed citywide, if we're talking about special assessment policies for infill development and density, should benefit the entire city. So what does that look like for South Fargo, North Fargo, downtown, in any other part of the city? And I really think that I can do that. That's what I've built my political career around, is bringing people together, working towards solutions, and not always having the answer, but making sure that we have people around the table who can help us get to the answer.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a little biased because I live downtown, but I think one of the things that drew me to Fargo when I moved here was that well, downtown specifically is very walkable, but it seemed to be going through a period of growth, really interesting growth, and it was thriving. And I think across the country, COVID, you know, changed everyone's plans, altered everything, and I think specifically downtown, is going through the same kind of weird growing pains that we're going through of how do you keep the momentum going while also just recovering, and life has suddenly gotten so expensive in the past 6 years since COVID happened, and all these kind of like things. But I think for me as a transplant, I've always loved the idea that Fargo seems to be figuring out how to be a small big city that is continuing to embrace something new. But I also recognize that because it's such a small community here, you also have the other people who have grown up here. They've been here for generations, and there's always going to be clearly something special about how it's always been. And those are like two competing ideas a little bit. Like, how do we keep it the same? That that nostalgic side of it, of like it just doesn't feel the same as like what I remember like growing up, while also embracing like well the fact that we're always moving to the future. So do you either just like always stay behind, or do you try to figure out your own version of like staying ahead? And I think sometimes we're really successful at doing that and being unique and interesting and being a really fun place to like, surprise people with. And then we also fall into the trap sometimes of sometimes new things kind of fail because it's too different than the same old Fargo people like always want. I don't really have a question here. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
saying.
No, I think you're right. And I think that we're at a pivotal time of a lot of us are having that conversation, whether with ourselves or within our neighborhoods or throughout the community, around who does Fargo want to be? Do we
Mhm.
want to continue to be, a small, close knit community, or are we going to be this growing, sprawling uh, uh, community? And I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and.
Mhm.
And it's really like, how do we hold on to the values of who we are culturally, with the way that we grow, with the way that we invest in ourselves to make sure that we can continue to be a community that everyone has the opportunity to thrive. I mean, I think of, regardless again of what part of town you live in, we want to make sure that that part of town is successful, because that means that people are going to be able to have jobs to go to. They're going to have homes they can own or rent, or however they choose to live. Strong public schools for kids to be able to go and be successful and be our next generation of not just workers, but innovators and entrepreneurs. And that's what's exciting about Fargo to me, is across industries, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, community development, people are always trying to answer the next question and find a Fargo solution to that. And I think we can bring that to City Hall. Doesn't just have to be a tech bioscience company that, fortunately has grown out of the basement of a lab at NDSU and has now been a multi-billion-dollar company that was headquartered here and then sold to a European country or a company, um, that has brought tons of great jobs to our community. What's the next version of that around housing? What is the next version of that about how do we deliver, efficient services to the public? We can be a partner with the private sector and the nonprofit sector to make sure that we're successful. And again, that's what excites me about running for this position, is there is this entrepreneurial spirit across the city. And overwhelmingly, while there are certainly people, and rightfully so, that want to keep us the way things used to be, we're just naturally growing already. Fargo is one of the fastest growing cities in the upper Midwest. I learned visiting with our economic development corporation a couple weeks ago. We are the 11th most economically diverse community across the country. And you think about it, we have these strengths of communities in Moorhead and in Fargo. So, two different states with two different types of leveraging. You have multiple communities across both states interconnected and trying to solve things or work together for housing, transit, job development, good public schools. And we can build off of that because it gives choice, whether it's businesses, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's homeowners on where they live, um, what community, but they also get to be a part of the greater community too. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I was part of the chamber leadership program back. Shout out to class of 2020. We didn't get to like really finish our cohort the best way because of COVID, but it was really interesting to see kind of how the again kind of both sides of that, how the business and ecosystem operates in these two kind of joined cities. Plus, you have West Park, you have the whole area. But a common theme of things we would talk about were we have all these people. A lot of the people that most of my friends either grew up here or they came here for college and then kind of stuck, which is great. But they're almost kind of a minority in the grand scheme of like the student population of the three or four, five. How many schools are here?
As far as colleges, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, there's three, four. I mean, you have the 2 years, and then you have the private. I mean, 5 to 7. Yeah.
yeah. And how do you keep? I mean, a lot of those people come to school here, graduate, and go on. And you do have some that stay, and they made their friends here, whatever. They made community. But we had a lot of conversations about how do we keep encouraging that? How do you get how do you get college students to leave their campus to really learn to love this community and then become part of the workforce here or become part of the people kind of continue to allow this to grow. And I think part of that is figuring out this identity piece of giving people the platform to embrace their identity in the community, but also giving people the opportunity to find their identity in the community. And I think that's with the diverse businesses, that ecosystem has to kind of exist where everyone can kind of find a piece of it. And that way we're not just a kind of a feeder community to bigger and better, places.
Right, right. I think you're spot on. And not only find your fit somewhere, but the opportunity to create it if it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Going
Yeah.
back to Stonewall Sports, or I think of, our amazing growing immigrant community and all the opportunities that have been opened up to a kid from Minot about food and dance and culture and religion and learning about the world that lives in my backyard here in Fargo and vice versa. And so, yeah, I mean, again, that's what I think I love about this community is people are willing to take a chance on themselves, and the community is willing to try to support people as best as we can.
I'm thinking from like a statewide perspective, like you said, obviously here in Fargo, there's a little bit of this like, oh, everyone only cares about downtown. Is that the feeling from a statewide perspective about Fargo? Are there a lot of the people who represent other cities across the state? Do they kind of feel like Fargo gets all the attention?
Absolutely. I mean, it's called imperial caste, especially when we get out to Bismarck. People get frustrated. So there are 47 legislative districts across the state. 11 of them are in Cass County.
Mm.
But Cass County is also, or the city of Fargo itself, is approximately 15 to 20% of the state population. And so it we bring a lot to the table and we request a lot from the table, but part of that is our success drives others' success. And unfortunately, as we see across this nation, but even in our own state, depopulation in rural America. But people are choosing to come to places like Fargo or Bismarck or Grand Forks or Minot because of healthcare, because of schools, because jobs are there. And that's why I get excited again, looking at what Fargo does with just emerging prairie and why is it blinking up? Grand Farm.
Mm.
We're trying to find these ways to help solve solutions or solve problems across our state so that we can continue to keep the rest of the state stronger. Healthcare delivery across the state, a lot of it is headquartered regionally here, but because Fargo has, a level 1 trauma center over at Sanford, we're able to help take care of families closer to home instead of them always having to go to Minneapolis to be treated for certain things. And so again, when we invest in ourselves, I think we certainly see that we come out on top, and Fargo should and wants to be a part of that solution, and not at the expense of the other parts of the state, but in partnership with.
Now you're currently like campaigning, obviously. The election, by the way, if you're listening, and it's not June yet. Election is June 9th. We'll say it again at the end too. June 9th is the election. Not in November. What's your favorite thing about campaigning, and what's your least favorite thing about campaigning?
Yeah. So my favorite part is the conversations with people. I'm meeting all kinds of folks who I didn't interact with. I have the opportunity, having served in leadership throughout our community, of knowing a lot of we'll call them the key players, right? Key people with groups like the Chamber of Commerce or nonprofits throughout our community. Some of the well-known entrepreneurs who have ideas because they're already plugged in. But, I can't remember if I think it's early next week. I'm meeting with somebody who has a concern. They reached out through my website. They have a concern about some development happening in their neighborhood, and they just want to have a conversation with the candidates about that. So just getting to meet with that person and understand what they love about Fargo, why they care about what this concern is. Is there a solution? How can we work towards it? And maybe there's not a solution, but it's a matter of, there's someone who cares about their community and wants to find a solution. And so, yeah, that's my favorite part is seeing, again, the dynamic community we have, the way that people want to see us invest in ourselves and move forward. The things I like least, I think, is the negative stuff that comes up. I think, I know a lot of what gets talked about in campaigns is the negatives, is the things that are going wrong. And certainly there some of those things should be discussed because they're challenges our community is facing, and we have to find solutions. But I'm more worried about us finding solutions. And I think that's what sets me apart compared to my competitors, the other people running for mayor, is they all have sat on the city commission. And so for them to continue to say that these problems exist and these are their ideas for changing it, well, show us what you've done in the last 2 or 4 years that represents that. Because I can show you a lot of things that I've done at the state to bring back to Fargo that have been solutions that we've identified based on the problems that exist, not just here, but throughout the state.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, where's the proof of the work,
Right.
if you've already been doing the work? Yeah. What when you're not campaigning, well, I guess you're kind of always campaigning right now. It's probably you're living and breathing campaigning. But outside of politics, outside of campaigning, what do you, just as a person? I feel like this is probably politics are probably most of your life at this point. I mean, you've invested since what 14 years, I guess, of your life to this, if not
Mhm.
more, because of college. Yeah, you're living and breathing this current campaign. Are you always traveling back and forth to Bismarck? Is that what, as a state legislator, is that what that looks like?
Yeah. So in North Dakota, we are extremely a part-time legislature. So we meet in a 2-year period. We meet for 4 months total, full time. So, an election happens on an even number year. So we go then at that November, the following January, we go to Bismarck for 4 months. I'll come back on Friday evenings, go out to Bismarck Sunday evenings, and then we work full time during the week. Once we've completed our 70 to 80-day legislative session in Bismarck, then we're in what's called the interim. So we've created study committees. There's always standing ones like K-12 education and healthcare and whatnot, but I'm also on things like a special ed funding committee, emergency response services committee, where we're looking at some really focused challenges our state is dealing with. And those generally meet quarterly or a few times between one session and the next. I'm on 9 of those. And so again, being in the super minority party, to make sure that we all have representation on those. Fortunately, I have a career in real estate that allows some flexibility. So I'm in Bismarck 2 or 3 times a month for a day meeting, but then I'm back home for the rest of it.
Wow, it's a lot of you're being pulled in a lot of different
I
directions.
am, but
Um,
I love it. People ask, what do you do in your free time? And I was like, well,
yeah.
I go to meetings. But that's why I really enjoy living in a place like Fargo, because when I am not working or not in meetings, there are places to go to trivia. There are events happening throughout town, concerts, food trucks, um, community events where you can just stop in and experience. You don't have to plan much. You can just be there. And so that's what's fun about the community and where I spend a lot of my time with my friends.
Yeah, we're on the verge of like Red River Market season and
Yeah.
everything. I can't wait. I mean, today that when we're recording, we're finally having like a almost 80-degree day. So it
Right.
feels like we're all like alive again a little bit.
Well, even, yeah, I was on campus at NDSU yesterday, and the fraternities and sororities that line University Drive I mean, their yards were filled because they were playing ping pong or beer pong or whatever it was, and some people were sunbathing already, and
Yeah.
tomorrow it's going to be 30 degrees. So,
Insane. I know. I'm trying not to get depressed about that. Yeah, whenever you think of, kind of we'll take it to downtown a little bit because you do live there, and we all spend a lot of time there. What, what makes downtown kinda special? I know we talked about, like, people in community and stuff, but there's something about downtown Fargo that feels like it's people I know people use the cliche of, like, hidden gem when they talk about their towns regardless, but I know I'm a little biased. There is something about Fargo that makes it like this hidden gem.
Mhm.
What do you think that is?
Well, I'll answer it two different ways. I think for people who aren't from here, they come here with pretty low expectations and then are wowed, regardless of downtown or other parts, all the other things we have in our community. For those of us that live here, I think it's the epicenter of some creativity, whether again that's entrepreneurship and business and research or nonprofits or just community activities, right? Having space that is kind of known as if you're going to try something new, the Red River Market, something at Broadway Square, the celebration last year we had of, I believe it was the Sudanese new Independence Day, and getting to learn about that. Um, it's just a space where things can be done and tried and people can gather. And whether it's intentional and you're going to an event or you're walking around and you bump into someone, those unintentional bumps that happen. So, what I'd be curious about is how do you recreate that in a place, in a neighborhood like near Rolt Farm, 32nd Avenue and 25th Street? You got great walkable neighborhoods, you have kind of a commercial business district, but how can we do some of the things like Folkways does downtown and others and go into some other neighborhoods where people who may not come downtown but would enjoy those types of experiences, or even down in the Davies neighborhood, how do we create those communities where people live so that they stay attached and they continue to love? And of course, then that gives more diversity of opportunity, so maybe I'll leave downtown to go to an event in South Fargo because they're doing something creative or different that we don't have downtown and vice versa.
Yeah, we had talked recently about and you had brought up this kind of like notion that really was a little bit of a light bulb for me because my friends and I do kind of stay a little bit in a bubble of other downtowners. Again, just because it's really easy to build your community that way. And we do sometimes go to West Fargo or go to South Fargo for certain things, whether it's to try a new restaurant or go to the movies and then something. But we typically stay downtown, but we also roll our eyes when we hear people who, like, never come downtown, or they only come downtown, like, for the street fair or something, and we're like, "What? Like, what you're out in West Fargo, like, come down like, is downtown scary?" But the flip side of that is, like, we never go to West Fargo, we
Right.
new go to South Fargo, and you're right, like, it's kind of like, how do you build the needs for the people that are gonna be there, and how do you be attractive to let people come and experience it? Like, I don't know what it's like to actually be someone who's in South Fargo, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's just it. It's we can take those lessons learned about when we do intentional development, right? And that's what downtown has happened, not just here in Fargo, but across the country in the early to mid 2000s, right? This new renaissance that happened throughout the country. And then, as you indicated, COVID kind of slapped that around, and now we're trying to recover and figure out what that looks like. But what does that intentional community development look like in different parts of our city? I mean, I'll give credit to West Fargo, who's created some competition to downtown Fargo, not just within the redevelopment of their own downtown, but the lights area
Mhm,
where people can go and hang out. There's bars, there's restaurants, there's a community space in the middle where there's concerts or shows or whatnot. Um, what does that look like in other parts? And I don't think it has to look at as competition too, but an opportunity for us all to experience different parts of our community or do different things throughout the weekend.
mhm.
I think before you would have moved to Fargo, the adage always was in the summer, you don't do anything, you don't plan anything on the weekends because everyone goes to the lakes.
Yeah.
And while there's certainly still some truth to that, the people head to the Detroit Lakes area, there's still a lot of activities going on the weekend because there's a lot of people who stick around. Or I even have friends who go to the lake and come back in town for things like the Red River Market, or if there's a show on a Saturday night at Up District or at the Lights, or.
There's enough of enough transplants that have made Fargo home now too that lake life is not necessarily part of their routine,
Right.
that, there's opportunity to serve those people and, and think about them, and I think you're right too. I'm thinking about, like, trying to be attractive to bring people in. I know, like, the Folkways and they try to create programming that's gonna hopefully invite people to come experience downtown. But I think a little piece of the magic too is thinking, like, I don't know that the lights necessarily needs to cater to me. Maybe they might do something that I might wanna go see or might but I think you have to find that nice balance between,
Sure.
like, how do you really embrace who your community is and what makes your community special and make that successful, and that and maybe is what becomes attractive. So you're right, kind of like figuring out how do you take the model that downtown Fargo has found successful, how do you take that to a smaller community, but still keep it unique to them and keep it,
Absolutely.
that's, yeah. I hope that's a thing I kinda find even in Fargo sometimes is our the next step up from us that we're kind of looking up to would be the Twin Cities, I would say, and sometimes things might be successful there, and then a few years later they make it here, but they don't quite work here because you can't just
Recreate
yeah,
or
yeah,
yeah,
it has to be real, it has
yeah.
to be genuine.
Well, and part of that is intention. Part of that intentionality isn't just someone doing something for your community, but how do you engage the neighborhoods in understanding what is it that you want? You know, what would you like to see that is authentic to your neighborhood or your community, but also then maybe sets you apart from everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's why I love, I like cities like Chicago over places like Minneapolis because I feel like Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, right? So you can go get different flavors or different experiences. You're not just doing the same thing where it's all looks like the same downtown, just in different parts of the community.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. There's no reason downtown West Fargo needs to feel like downtown Fargo,
Right.
or even Moorhead. Across the river, they're going through this whole renovation. It doesn't need to just match downtown Fargo. It's nice that they're cohesive and kind of like complement each other. We're all kind of part of the same region, but you're right. Everything should kind of have its own identity. Make it worthwhile to be able to come and do things in every place.
Yeah. Well, and again, I look at, the development and the partnership both with the school district, but the city of Moorhead of Bluestem Amphitheater, right? We have, specifically one production company in town that does a lot of events there, but a lot of other people get to host events there too. And everyone I mean, one of the reasons people can't wait for spring to come is they know the concert lineups coming and the outdoor experience. And, again, that's been trying to be recreated on a smaller scale at Up District. And, that producer is figuring out how to make that work. And especially when you have to deal with weather and open space and all of that. But, you know, how do we it's clear that there's a demand or an interest in those types of things. So how do we do it, especially when we know we get this, decent amount of time to enjoy being outdoors,
hmm
and we all want to be outside when that happens.
we've been talking about this is just like one topic. I can't imagine this is where I can't imagine being a politician having to figure out how to find the answer or find a version of the answer, the solution about one thing while also thinking about the hundreds of other things that are going on in the community. Because yeah, there's too much. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, well, that's where I think good planning comes into place. Again, coming back to, I'm running for mayor and people want me to have the answer. And I think, there's a responsibility we have as people running for office to try to have answers. But what I would say to the public or the voting public or the people who live here is like, I don't think the leader should always have the answer. The leader should have the skills to bring, again, the right people together to help find the answer, including the person asking the question. And so certainly there are things that I have more experience and knowledge of, but there are other areas that I'm going to need more input on. And I look at things like the Fargo Growth Plan, which had a lot of community input several years ago. And people tell me when I have my listening sessions or talking to neighborhoods, people remember that experience. People remember Go 2030, the core neighborhood plan, but they feel like nothing's come from it. Even though some staff in City Hall are implementing those things, they aren't reporting, people aren't feeling it's reported back or that they're a part of that implementation. So, I use the growth plan, which most people don't know exists, but it is how Fargo has said, the city commission has said, this is where we're going to focus on growth, both outward and internal. So then I sat down with some immigrant business leaders. I said, has anyone talked to you about the growth plan? They're like, well, what's the growth plan? So I try to explain it. It's like, so how do we go work with some of these business owners who are immigrants and say, where do you see yourself in the growth plan? How can we help your business that continues to grow? And you might have a couple different storefronts. Would you want to relocate to a different part, where we're going to be doing infill? So how can we connect you with the developer? I think that's where the role of the city can help play is work with that intentionality of the plan that has been developed, and how do we bring the community in and see themselves in that plan so that they can continue to be a part of it as it's implemented.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on two like really important things. It's the you can't just make the plan based on what like the top down vision is. It really has to be what are all the priorities? Because again, every single person, every business leader, every citizen has a different priority, whether that's this damn pothole that I run into every single day. Why is that not filled? That's my number one problem. To, yeah, how do you even start a business in this town because everything's so expensive? Everyone's got a priority. How do you create a plan that tries to at least figure out a through line there to start making some solutions? But then the next part is the implementation piece. And you're right, you really have to, you almost can't really present the plan if you don't even have the implementation like at least somewhat ready, or at least even just a project to say, this is how we're gonna start implementing it to really get that trust,
Right.
on the back end. So it's nice to hear like, yeah, the solution piece of that isn't just we're gonna do things and tell people that's how we're doing it. It's really figuring out how do we make this work for everybody.
Yeah. And I think being able to be flexible in the plan, right? Because
Yeah,
the plan was written how many years ago?
exactly.
And, if another COVID type thing or a flood happens or, something that impacts our community that we have to shift or adapt. Um, but also with that flexibility, I think allowing for some innovation and experimentation. I was visiting this morning with a home builder, and we were talking about attainable, affordable housing and how do we do that when there's all these external impacts in terms of the cost of labor, the cost of land, the cost of building supplies. And part of it is where are we comfortable with maybe saying, let's deploy a project or try something new that might not have to follow all the rules. Um, just a one off or a two off to see if it can work. And then does it work and meet the needs of our community? So we're not saying carte blanche, we're getting rid of all the regulations and all the rules, but we want to try to find a way to make things more affordable and attainable. Is there a way that we can help incentivize or allow it to happen as a model to see if it can work or not and be a Fargo solution? And that's what I think is an important part about things like those plans of how do we create flexibility and adaptation, innovation as part of those.
I was gonna say that's innovation right there. And you're right, like a plan usually relies on 100%. Like if the plan's gonna work, you got to do all the things in the plan. That's nearly impossible in the current world we live in.
Right.
So you're right, having that flexibility built in, or that understanding of flexibility built in, I think allows for changing when you need to, but it also allows for the innovation because as if you're honed in on this one result that you need to hit because of the way the plan says it, but then you're right, technology changes or a new way to do it comes about, or you think of a new way, it's got to be allowed in there. And why can't Fargo be the leader in figuring out some of those solutions and become the model for not only just other or smaller towns that look up to Fargo, but I think there are things about Fargo that bigger cities, could learn a lesson from.
Yeah. Well, and again, you hear the adage when people are running for office at all levels of, we're going to run a government like a business. Well, the one area that government doesn't do that businesses do every day is some innovation, taking risks and understanding that sometimes it's not going to work out, but we're going to learn from the things that didn't work out.
Mhm.
Now, there's a line there, and there has to be guardrails because government is also using taxpayer dollar, right? People want to make sure that what they're investing in and their government's investing in is working and being held accountable. But where is that tolerance level? Again, how can we say let's have an agreement of trying something new here only to see how it works and if it works or not?
Yeah, like where's the risk level
Right.
at? Yeah. I think at Stonewall it's been interesting because our chapter is the smallest one of all the national chapters. But I think a thing that we have embraced is really being the community piece. I mean, they're all community pieces. They're all community focused chapters, but a lot of them they have other ways for the LGBT community to get involved. And Stonewall is just a facet of that greater LGBT community. They've got gay bars, they've got other. There's a lot of other places for people
Mhm.
to find themselves in that community. In Fargo, we don't really have there's not a lot of other like places for people to go. So we've had the unique challenge, I guess, of kind of filling two buckets there of being a sports league, but also kind of being this place that people who are looking for others like them can feel safe to go. We also have, I mean, our demographics. We actually lean more people who identify as straight. There's allies who are part of it because they're looking for places and community that believe the same as them, or it feels safe, or they want to, support their friends. And that's very welcoming too. And it's been really rewarding to see that, but it's also been an interesting challenge to recognize what our own identity is. But what we've learned from that is we've had to be really creative in how we show up. And other larger chapters have seen that. And it's just things that they've never had to think about. And that's in a weird way, that's almost kind of like a example of almost kinda how I feel like Fargo could be a kind of figuring out, like, we have to show up a little bit differently. But some of those creative places, you get to take those risks or you get to try new things. That's what makes you interesting and kind of attractive to other people,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And a reason people stay or come here to
Uh,
begin with. And yeah, exactly.
what has it been like just being an openly gay legislator? What has that kind of journey been like? Has it changed for better or worse over the years? Has it kind of been like a roller coaster of kind of acceptance? What has that been like for you?
Yeah. In all honesty, I've been fortunate in the fact that, from being an openly gay person who ran for office in 2012 till now, um, I don't think my identity has been a detriment. And I say that from the standpoint of like outside of this one small group in 2012 out of Virginia who did some YouTube ads about me, I've never had anyone publicly attack me because of my sexuality. And what I've been able to show is that regardless of my sexuality, I get things done, right? And I want to partner with people, and some of my friends in the legislature laugh a little bit about even some of the legislators that I partner with on certain things, because those are the people who are also introducing the bills that would impact your and my life personally. But I find the common ground where we can, and try to work and then hopefully show them that who I am is not a threat to them and their families, or their community, or whatever the reason they're introducing really crappy legislation at times. Um, but to be able to find those areas to move forward. Um, what's it like to be an openly gay legislator? I think first and foremost, I often have to remind myself of what would 12 or 16-year-old Josh have thought if there was an openly gay legislator back when I was a young person. The responsibility that comes with that, but also the responsibility of opening the door for other people. And so while I was the first openly gay, there are several openly gay legislators now in North Dakota. We've for years have had in the city council, and prior to that, the school board here in Fargo. John Strand, was elected well before I was. So, as far as elected office, we had a city commissioner, Lane Anderson, um, who was well known and respected in this community. So I guess in short of it, I haven't been impacted, but I also recognize that there's privilege in that within our community, because there are a lot of people in our community who are still hurt, whether it's by family or other people in the greater community, because of who they are, who they love. Um, and so I have a responsibility to continue to stand up for those people, understand their experiences, try to give them voice, and work for North Dakota, and hopefully just Fargo as, being my focal point, that we all can thrive in. In the end of the day, people just want to live their lives and enjoy it and do the things that make them happy, and do it in a way that, as long as you're not hurting other folks, let's let it happen.
Do you feel like Fargo is a place for that?
Absolutely. I think part of Fargo's fabric is we are a place that anyone can be successful. Again, that doesn't mean people don't have challenges, and that there are some really crappy things out there that people experience in our community. But our goal and our ethos, I think, is one of which, again, if you're willing to work hard, if you're doing the best that you can, if you're making sure that you're, taking care of yourself and others, we have a place for you in our community, and we want you to thrive.
What do you feel like, kind of like to wrap it up at the end here, is there anything, if you had to, I mean, obviously there's so many things in the community to worry about. If there is like kind of one message that you hope for some reason, if some random person ends up across this that is like still figuring out who they're going to vote for or something, what is kind of like the thing that you hope that they like consider when they're thinking about potentially voting for you?
Yeah, first and foremost, I've spent the last 3 months just listening to people, and now that we're, at the time of recording, 6 weeks out from the election, it's about how do I take what I've heard and implement that into the campaign, and make sure that we continue to listen to folks. So, I hope anyone who just stumbles across this or doesn't know who I am, or much about the mayor's race is, first and foremost, I'm someone who's gotten stuff done by working together with others. I don't have to tear down people to improve my status or to accomplish my work or my goals. But also, I am an outsider in this race. If you're tired of the way things are going, or you feel the shine is rubbed off in Fargo, if you're looking for more of the same, then you'd want to vote for one of the other candidates. But if you're looking for someone who's going to try things a little differently, improve on what works and change what doesn't, I think I'm definitely your guy, and hope folks will vote on June 9th. There's in Fargo or North Dakota specifically, you can early vote the week before in person, and you can vote by mail too. So if anyone wants to go to my website, joshforfargo.com, you can find all that information.
What does election day look like for you? Do you have like superstitions? Is there like a shirt that you know you're gonna wear, or like are you gonna drink orange juice with like just your right hand or something like that, or like what does the day look like for you?
No, no. Usually for me, it's still doing the work. So contacting folks that we know who are voters, especially low propensity voters, to remind them that they can go vote that day, that up until 7 o'clock, they can still cast their ballot. Fargo or Cass County, it's really easy because we have vote centers. You can vote at any of the locations. So if you live in South Fargo but work in North Fargo, you can vote at the Fargo Dome. You don't have to vote in South Fargo. So there's some flexibility there. Because the weirdest feeling, I remember one of my first elections is when 7 o'clock hit, I knew at that moment there's nothing more I can do.
Is
So
that
even though
terrifying? Or like you're making my armpits sweat,
yeah,
and I'm not even you, and it's not even
it's
June 9th.
it's terrifying, but it's a giant weight off your shoulder too. Because then you start reflecting on, did I work as hard as I can? Did I talk to people I needed to? And what that has resulted in for me is someone who, out of almost every election except one, I've won them. And that's because I put the work in. I go listen to folks, and I'll continue to do so once elected.
All right, let's pretend that it's election day, and you do. I hope this isn't like I hope I'm not jinxing
You won't
anything.
jinx it.
Uh, what do you think? Is there who do you want to thank? Or what do you think like you want to say? Like say, hey, I just tallied the votes, you won. What do you think the first thing you're gonna like do or say is?
Uh, that's hard. I think about that sometimes when brushing my teeth. And yeah, when I'm brushing my teeth, that's the time I'm having the speeches on the floor, the conversations with someone that are tough because I'm just really thinking focus. Um, so as I've thought about that, it's going to first and foremost be my family and the supporters and things like that. And I have an amazing team who are helping run my race. But I know that I'm a fairly emotional person, so I know that when I look out into that crowd, that I know some of the faces I will see, and depending on who else is in that room, just being prepared for that emotional charge of, you've accomplished something for yourself, but you've accomplished something for them, and the work just begins in that moment. So as hard as the work has been up until election day, the real work starts, 5 minutes after being told that you're elected, because you become the mayor. And now everything you said you're going to run on, you have to start implementing or finding ways to implement.
Thinking about those people that you're looking at. This is the last question, I promise. Think about like 12 or 16-year-old Josh who's out there, and say he's in that crowd watching someone like you become the first openly gay mayor of Far right? Oh, first openly gay mayor
I
of
believe
Fargo?
so. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would you want? What would you hope they take from this? What's the kind of what's the kind of thing you'd want to share with them specific to that 12 or 16-year-old Josh?
Yeah. Well, I'd hope just that anything is possible. If you're willing to put the work in and be a good person to other people, know what you don't know, and learn beyond that, that you too can accomplish anything, whether that's being an elected office, whether that's getting that job, whether it's competing on the field in a certain sport, or extracurricular activity, that, don't let the things that people want to ding us against, in this case, it would potentially be my sexuality, being an openly gay man, hold you back, prove them otherwise. And honestly, sometimes that's the best form of revenge, right? Is to show them that, even though you were a jerk to me and you thought that I wasn't worthy, or I'm different than you, doesn't mean that our neighbors don't, and that the greater public is in agreement with you. And I think we see that time and time again, is that we know that Fargo, North Dakota itself, even if it's a conservative state and in our country, is a state, we are places of, we want people to be successful, regardless of who you are. And so if you're willing to put the work in, more than likely we're going to stand behind you and try to help you get across that finish line.
That's good. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm excited to vote for you. I'm excited to kind of see where the next 6 weeks goes. I'm excited to hear who you talk to and what you talk about, and I'm excited to see the solutions you bring to Fargo.
Yeah.
It's such a special place, and it deserves to keep being innovative and growing. And I know there'll always be barriers out there, but I think as a person in the community, it's nice to know that the leaders in charge are trying to figure out how to not let those barriers keep us down. So
Yeah.
thank you for the service you've done as someone representing my neighborhood. Thank you for the leadership you have been as an LGBT person, and just although I will say, even though I'm saying all these thank yous to you, but next week at trivia you're going down. But other than that, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I love the podcast. As a curious person, I love learning about other people. And so that's what I think is great about your podcast specifically is that, it's obviously the people I know is what it's titled, but it's also digging deeper in who people are and understanding what drives them and their hopes and dreams and goals and challenges. And so it's fun. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.